We recording? What's
Right.
up, everybody? Welcome to the Hard Stance Hardcore podcast. This is John Hoffman talking right now. I got Antonio Marquez from Spine with me here, Nick Donahue from Canadian Rifle,
well,
Violent End, and like a slew of other Chicago bands here with me. The three of us are going to be doing this hardcore podcast. Um, the idea that we had for it was to basically each time review slash discuss an old hardcore record. I guess old is kind of subjective. It could be 80s, 90s, 2000s, but um, that was the idea, to have a conversation about that. And then towards the end, go into a discussion about a newer hardcore record that's more modern. I'd say, within at least within the last few years. So, that's kind of what we planned on doing. I'm gonna kind of let everybody else introduce themselves a little bit, just kind of as an introduction here. Um, Antonio.
Yep, I'm Antonio from Spine. I think this will be good.
Oh yeah, got a lot to say there.
Man
yeah.
of little words.
Well, hopefully more than that eventually.
Eventually,
It'll pick up. I'm Nick, and I literally haven't played the drums in over a fucking year, so I don't even feel like it is like fair to say I'm in any bands right now. But like,
I didn't know what school you worked at, so I couldn't.
that would have been that might be more like applicable to my life.
teacher, head teacher at the School of Hard Knocks.
But yeah, I actually
Hard stance.
oddly, my fear is like the idea of any student ever somehow stumbling on hearing this. So I won't mention that.
They're gonna be real upset about your opinion on old hardcore records.
There's gonna be a lot of disagreement.
A lot heavy disagreements there.
Before we get started on like the actual talk about the records, I realized I didn't really say anything about myself. My name isn't really worth that much, so I'll just say
Agreed.
I've been in some bands.
You've seen some shit.
I've seen some shit. Naperville, Illinois is pretty.
Yeah,
pretty,
man. You missed the old New York, right?
Yeah, when we wore like trains around our waist and had construction sites. Yeah, I used to do vocals for Weekend Nachos for the entirety of our band. I played drums and Spine with Antonio, and let's see, I don't know. I don't really have anything else to say about my musical history, besides that as of right now. So I'm sure something will come up at some point when these guys are making fun of me. But why don't we go ahead and get started on the hard stance?
Let's do it.
Well, the record that we all decided to talk about today to kick things off is "Start Today" by Gorilla Biscuits. I'm not going to share the first opinion. One of you guys got to do that.
See, I specifically hoped. I think everyone wants to go last. It's so,
Yeah.
I'll go first.
I really
You'll
think
go first.
It makes most sense for me to go last. I think
You've got the most meat on the bone here, my friend. So I think you go first.
I mean, you would think so, but I tend to freeze up during this. But
We'll see.
I mean, I don't like it. I think it's crap. It's a record.
Very constructive of you.
It's a record that every single person in hardcore loves, and I don't like it. I think it's a pretty disgraceful hardcore record in my opinion. I love the Gorilla Biscuits 7-inch. I think it's great, for what it is. Bunch of like 15-year-old kids playing fast punk, but really don't like the LP. Not at all. I think it's cheesy, but not in a way that like makes sense. If that makes sense. I think it's like you got a lot of songs that are like either about really dumb things that don't matter, or you've got, you know, decent topics that are just kind of like very overly optimistic. I don't know, it just doesn't make for a good record lyrically. And I don't know, I feel like I'm kind of like taking on like the entirety of this review. Just I have more to say, but I'm
Yeah,
curious like
but sonically, if there was one thing that you could take from the record that you would say something positive about, what would that be? Is there anything, whether it's the art, whether it's maybe like the impact, whether it's, you know, the inclusion of horns at the beginning of the record, like, is there anything that you could say that if you were to be like, hey, I'll give it this, that would be it? Is there anything that you would give it, or is it just bad all around?
no, no, definitely not. And I was gonna get to that, but I mean, like, yeah, the horn intro is fine, you know. I mean, you know, kind of got like a little less than Jake feel at the beginning there. But no, I don't mind the intro. Actually think musically, I think New Direction, you know, starts it off with a great track, like musically. I think that, you know, it's kind of funny how, you know, with the exception of New Direction and what's that fucking song called? Track 3, the one about racism.
um,
Degradation. Yep.
Degradation, right? With the exception of those two songs, the entire record kind of just sounds very happy, almost. Um, it's almost got like like it almost sounds like it influenced like bands like Lifetime, you know.
Well,
Um,
because it did.
yeah, I'm fine, dude.
It's because it did. But I mean,
Yeah,
like, I think that, like, I think you bring up like a few good points. So like on my take of this is, I think the record's pretty awful. And but I will tell you that Antonio of
very
like
constructive. Very constructive.
the only, hold on, I'll tell you why, the Antonio of like maybe when I was 13 years old, like this record. There was a time that I did connect with this record, that I did like it. I remember vividly, and I'll get into a little bit more of the specifics, but I remember vividly like when they had done their reunion, which I definitely want you to talk about, John, because I know that you definitely have something to say about that. But the reunion in '06, you know, I remember when that happened. It was a big deal. I also love like the 7-inch. I think if I listened to the 7-inch for the first time now, I don't think I'd like it, but because I did when I was younger, it's something that I still, there's something fun about it. Like it's kind of like, you know, listening to you know, both like Crippled Youth, right? Like, you know, I would actually argue that the Crippled Youth 7-inch is better, but it's, there's something like, there's something cool about it. I don't know. And then listening to it while you're young, you just connect to, right? Youth Crew and everything like that. So but I think the thing with this record, with the LP specifically, is that as my like interest in hardcore and the style of hardcore that I liked, I didn't go in the direction that anything that sounds like Gorilla Biscuits, you know, with this LP, like I don't like anything that sounds like it either. So it's not like, oh, like I like Lifetime or I like pop punk bands or anything like that. I really don't like any. It's just not my thing. So
I
like,
can vouch for that when it comes to you. Like, if you don't like Start Today, you really don't like anything else that it influenced either, for the most part.
100%. Like, and it's not that it's not that, I guess, not that I think it's like a terrible record, because I think that there's obviously a place for it. There's a ton of people that
You're an
like
awful,
love this record. You know what I mean?
you're an
Like
awful list.
it's a record that's like pretty influential for lots of different reasons. But for me, I think it's like you know, I don't find it to be interesting. I don't find it to really capture the interest that I like about hardcore, which is a lot more. I would say when I listen to hardcore, I like music to be fast and I like it to be aggressive. It doesn't have to be fast all the time, but that has to be a component, and that aggressiveness needs to be there. And I will say that there are songs like you kind of like touched on that are still aggressive, like on the 7-inch. I mean, so aggressive that, you know, Sib's voice cracks on the 7-inch, right? So like on
Let me
the,
say this real quick. I want to say that like you make a good point about the Gorilla Biscuit 7-inch. Um, that is something that I still love to this day, but I don't know if I would like it if I listen to it now. It's definitely like a kind of like a coming of age type of
definitely.
record. But you know, looking back on their discography, like I can say that it's definitely superior. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, totally. So I mean, I think that I just think that when I look at it like from a front to back, I understand the allure and like why people love the record so much and why they lose it anytime like Gorilla Biscuits plays. But Gorilla Biscuits to me embodies, especially from the Rev catalog, a turning point, I think, for hardcore, just as much as bringing it down did for hardcore. You saw a big shift with Judge, and you saw a big shift with Gorilla Biscuits that you really didn't see with Youth of Today until later on in the 90s. You know, it wasn't until after Shelter and those bands kind of started that you saw like a Youth Crew revival again, where people were like, Youth of Today is cool again. Whereas like Judge really sustained their fandom and their influence through the 90s. And I would say Gorilla Biscuits did too, almost to a larger audience than Judge could have ever done, because I would say that this record and Gorilla Biscuits had a direct influence on what a lot of that modern pop punk stuff that we hear now, and even in the late 90s. So with that said, I think it's really important to kind of hear what Nick has to say on this, and kind of see like what his take is and how he connects to it.
Yeah. So, and this is what's funny, because I feel like I was honestly, you know, because we had some like time pass between when we felt like we were going to start doing this and then like getting it rolling. And like, I honestly feel like, you know, I listened to this record a lot in between then and now, just to kind of like really assess my feelings again. And like, I just came to the conclusion that like, no matter what I'm going to say, it's going to sound like I'm making fun of this record, being ironic or something. Because like, I like agree with like John when you said it's cheesy in a way that doesn't make sense. Like you're absolutely fucking right. But like that rules. Like it's so like absurd the way that, and like weirdly unique how like indisputably uncool this record is.
But is that the intention though? That's the thing that bothers me.
But like I like the intention, they failed at their intention. Like it's true. Like the record, like my read of what the intention is, tell me if you agree, is like, this is a record that stands for like being earnest, like being very earnest and sincere.
Definitely. That's what makes me so fucking irked about it.
Yeah.
Well, but it's like, okay, all right.
What a crock of shit, you know?
Thinking of like the Rev catalog, like Chain of Strength is also the thesis of Chain of Strength is earnestness and sincerity and like passion. But I fucking like, you actually, to me, like get chills to listen to Chain of Strength. Like to
Absolutely,
me,
dude. Chain of Strength,
100%.
Gorilla
Fucking
Biscuits,
rules, dude.
like Start Today does not elicit anything close to that level of passion or emotion in me.
I mean, that's good. I think that, you know, we can still be friends, you know?
but like, that's in a weird way what kind of makes it like uniquely good, because it's like, how did they do that? Like, how did they get so earnest? And it is like topical, like they do sing about topics. And yes, I agree, like many of the topics are ones that like you can't, like Stand Still is
let's talk about that, dude.
Like
I want to hear what you say.
Go ahead. No,
I mean,
go on.
Like, if you're gonna mention Donkey Kong in a song, it better be fucking rules.
Well,
not some like, oh, you know what? You shouldn't be playing Donkey Kong. There's things to think about. Fuck you.
But dude, it's amazing that like in essence, nothing that they say is like, it's not like like fucked up or anything. It doesn't actually like it kind of just makes you like, you know what? It's like, it's not bad that they were like saying like we shouldn't watch TV, because like, you know what? We really kind of shouldn't, but like,
okay, all right. So we can agree that like it's almost like the entire record is like an episode of Full House, where like the music plays at the end, and like,
and I also think Full House rules.
Well, Full House does rule because
it does rule.
You know, that's a different podcast. But I mean, like, you know, Danny Tanner's got some shit to say in every episode, right? But like, I mean, yeah, maybe there's some validity to it, but it's like, I'm not taking that seriously, and I'm not putting that show on a pedestal because of those life lessons of Danny Tanner. You know, if anything, I'm going to make fun of it because, I mean, even when I'm making fun of that aspect of it, that's still not what I like about it, and that's Start Today for me, kind of.
Sure, But like, okay, oh God, I feel like you started something good with this comparison because it's like,
Yeah.
Oh, I know you love Full House.
I'm getting like, I don't want. First of all, I gotta clarify. Like, I don't really view this record as one that is universally revered by like hardcore fans. Like, I do think it's got a. I totally agree, Antonio. It's got like this broad appeal. It seems like I didn't even really realize this, but it seems like it's like by far like the most popular and like best selling Rev record, right? Like,
Yeah, I think
I
it
would
is.
say it has to be. I mean, Bringing It Down, I think what sold like 30 to 50,000 copies or something. So that's a lot. But did Start Today surpass that?
I think it is.
by quite a bit, right?
Yeah, I don't know the actual number. I remember seeing it one time and just being like, "What?" Like something crazy. It's a crazy number.
I would imagine that record might have sold a lot when it came out, but I would imagine that in the 90s, like as like, Rev developed a back catalog, I would say that it probably sold tons of records in the 90s as different generations got into art.
Well, especially when you think of Civ's like solo stuff, right? Like with his other band, like that because Civ had a following itself too, which I think also like had people. Which really, if you think about it, it's kind of a Civ record. When you listen to Civ, it's kind of like a Civ record. Like, but
it's like the Offspring smash of Youth Crew.
If we're gonna compare it to Civ, then I am gonna go back. I'm gonna backpedal a little bit and say it's definitely better than anything Civ did. I mean, let's be real here.
Like, but okay, so I do feel like I should justify my actual, like, you're right. I'm kind of like just saying the things that are weird about it, but I think it's like Time Flies to me is the best song on this record. The song Time Flies is the best because it's like lighthearted enough and it like kind of doesn't bite off more than it can chew. And it's like does like its melodic happy thing. And it's actually a happy song, like it's about like exuberance and youth. And like, that is one thing. I mean, they're fucking like what, 20? I think they're like still like 20 when this record
that is one of the better songs on the record.
I think it's the best song.
I would rather see the
other best song
band Time Flies play than Gorilla. I would rather go back in time and see them again. But anyway, I mean that's one of the better songs. I could give it that.
And Cats and Dogs, I know Cats and Dogs is the only song that has a consequential like message, I think. And I know you hate it. I know you hate it.
That is the worst song on the record.
But I think it's good. Like, and the lyrics, man, like I think they're actually pretty good for like when I think about it, I'm like, if I knew a 20-year-old right now who wrote this song, I'd be like, that's cool. Like, I'd be like, yeah, that's like your head's on your shoulders. Like you're saying something that's like kind of with it and like I agree with. And I just think it's like, I don't know. I wouldn't really ask for much more. And I think it's like
wait 1 minute more.
I can't wait. I think it's like, this was this is another thing I remembered because this was definitely one of the first hardcore records I bought, which I think is true for a lot of people.
Definitely.
Like I fucking, I got like the UCD at Busy Bee or Record Breakers or something. And at Busy Bee, they had like an extra large, like tan Gorilla Biscuits shirt. So because they had that shirt there, there was like one of like 5 hardcore shirts there. Like I bought the shirt. And so like that incentivized like getting more into Gorilla Biscuits, like because like once you have the shirt, you have to be like, I have to really like this band.
Yeah, you don't want someone
You're committed.
To be like, yo, name 5 songs.
You name 5 songs, poser.
So this took on a little bit of an influential role, and so this was a record to me that at this time in my life, at 13, 14, I don't remember. I think I had to be 12 or 13 actually, and it was important to me to have like a go-to record that or a handful of go-to records that I could be like, look, like to my parents and say like, look, how could you say this music is a bad influence? Like, look at these lyrics.
Your defensive I could take it to my parents and tell them, look, it's not so bad.
They're Christians in a band.
Well, it's like I kind of just was like, oh yeah, and it also was just like a gotcha. Like, yeah, you think this music is like corrupting me? Like, well, read this. Like and honestly, in retrospect, my parents were probably like, our kid is so lame.
Yeah, dude, they wouldn't have said that if you showed them Break Down the Walls. They'd be like, yeah, maybe he's got a point, and this is pretty badass. But
No, I did show them break down the walls though. That was one of the other ones because I was like, look, they like talk about helping people,
well, I mean, we'll do that record another time. Yeah, no, I don't know, man. I gotta be honest. Everything you're saying just makes it sound even lamer.
I'm wrecking. That's what I said. I know going in, it's gonna sound like I'm like.
I think you bring up a lot of valid points though, because I do think if we take the aspect of like the fact that like this record does not connect with me at this point in my life, it hasn't connected with me probably since a little bit after I listened to it, because Gorilla Biscuits, like I said, I think the 7-inch was the first thing I listened to, then the LP, and I was always like, oh, I like the LP too, and then I was like, nah, I don't like the LP. I don't like anything about the LP, but there's things about it that are worth acknowledging. And like you said, lyrically, there is a lot of like concepts and things that they're trying to tackle and speak to at a very young age being from the scene in New York, that like you probably wouldn't expect that level of like insight or depth from like a 20-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's worth noting, especially like trying to weave something lyrically. And I think, John, you could probably relate to this too. I mean, when you're writing lyrics, you're always trying to like come across with a message that like sometimes can be very blunt, or it can be something that you're trying to kind of weave into to make the person kind of think a little bit harder into like what you're trying to say without being so blunt about it. And so I think that those are things that are on this record that I think from a message standpoint that are worth noting. Does it make it cheesy? Does it make those concepts, not the concepts, does it make the way that they are conveyed cheesy? Definitely, but like, I think that is part of the charm. I think that people continue to like gravitate towards this record years and years after the fact. I mean, grown men going nuts over Gorilla Biscuits. You know what I mean? Like, because they have it's that connection, it's that charm, And the thing is too that Gorilla Biscuits does that I don't think that you see a lot with like Judge and with like Youth of Today or even Chain of Strength, is that there was also a certain level of inclusion, I think, when it came to Gorilla Biscuits, that, whether you were male or female or non-binary or whatnot, like whatever, like you gravitated to Gorilla Biscuits because of those things that they talked about and the things that they were about, especially on Start Today. You don't really see that with other bands from that era. It's I'd say with that, I mean, that level of like feeling of inclusion is something important to kind of speak to as well, because you just didn't see it with those other bands,
Yeah,
it's always perplexed me. I haven't been able to figure that out. Like I've never like been like, hey, like what is it really about it other than the lyrically and kind of like the music? I mean, there's a fucking harmonica on this record. You know what I mean? Like, what is it? What is it about it that like is inviting, that makes it more inviting than like we're not in this alone? You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that everything you're saying is actually really, really smart. I think those are really good points. Nick, the things that you're saying also, like, I can't disagree with any of that. And like, I definitely am not changing my stance on it, but I will say that like you're opening me up to a lot of things that I think I always kind of knew about it, but like can admit that like this record definitely made a positive impact. And there are things about like it's almost like one of those things where I don't dislike it enough to where I wish it didn't exist. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah,
I think
that's fair.
I think that it definitely is an important record. I do think it's lame.
Yeah, but it's like kind of undeniably lame.
The song Cats and Dogs specifically, like, why am I so upset? Don't even own a pet. Like, it's just like even if he's saying that line in a different melody, I might not hate it so much. Like, everything is put together to be this like just a bunch of bullshit.
Well, okay, if we're good, the funniest lyrical thing to me, and I don't even know if it's true, if I'm even accurately depicting it, but in Things We Say, which to me is Start Today and Things We Say are the worst songs on the record. The Things We Say might be the worst. But like in the chorus, does he or do they not? Like it's like, I can't believe, and then do they go like, he can't believe in the back?
Yeah.
Is that the lyric?
I always thought maybe they said "we can't believe." Like,
Oh,
I can't believe, we can't believe this.
I thought it was "We Can't Believe" too, but that's a good point. We should look that up and see.
If he says he can't believe, I would want to know whether the first Typo Negative record came out before that or not. Because there's that, I know you're fucking someone else. Who knows
you're fucking. Like, I can just imagine somebody very inquisitively coming in and just saying, "He knows you're fucking someone else."
I mean, like, there's certain things that like we could point out. Like, it's almost like the more ridiculous things we kind of like bring to the surface about this, like I might even like the record more. Because
here we go. Jesus.
I knew I could do it. I knew I could do it.
The whole point of this is, I would think, to kind of like be open to like what's being said.
I said what I said from an openness standpoint. That's about as open you're gonna get when it comes to me.
Never, man. You're the king backpedaler. You started out saying it's awful, and then all of a sudden you're like,
well, I think it's important, but here's the thing. It's important to clarify. I still think it's an awful record.
No,
I do, but I can acknowledge the certain contributions that record has made. And, it's one of those things, like you said yourself, it's not a record that I wish didn't exist. I don't hate it that much or anything like that. It's just a record that I would just, at my age and where I'm at in life and the things I like, it's just something I would rather not have to listen to ever again, period. But I'll acknowledge the contributions and the things about it that, especially the things we say, in regards to this, because I think that's like, I think that's important. But I'm not flip-flopping like you, dude. Ain't happening.
I mean, dude, there's no flipping going on. I'm just saying, if Walter and Arthur are really in the background going like, he can't believe what he said. I'm just saying that does give the record some additional credit, because that
is cool.
I mean, somehow, like, this is the weirdest twist of this conversation is I feel like there's something in this conversation is embodying the philosophy of the song Two Sides.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what's weird?
Antonio, you're actually embodying it, I think, by really assessing, even though you're not judging, you're really giving credence and validity to
I think you got to. I mean, I think the real big thing, and we haven't touched on this yet, and Nick, you know this better than I do because you lived for it. But John hated Gorilla Biscuits so much that he quit Few and the Proud because he did not want to play the reunion. Can you please tell us the story about what happened, why it happened, and if indeed it was because you hated Gorilla Biscuits so much that you said, "I'm quitting this band that you love to be in"?
Yeah, you missed the fucking point, man. I did not quit the band because I hated Gorilla Biscuits specifically. That show could have been fucking Judge, could have been Side by Side. Any band that's gonna get back together and sell $30 Paul Frank shirts, it's like I've never been a reunion guy. You know this, right? I've never.
Have you played reunions before?
I don't think so. Have I? I don't know.
Yeah,
like in your own bands?
I think Plan of Attack did a reunion once.
Yes.
Oh yeah, you did play it.
I mean, I'll back myself up on that too. Let's make that this whole episode about that. Whatever. But yeah, I just at the time, I mean, you also have to consider 2006. I was 22. I mean, that's like
older than Gorilla Biscuits were when they made
older than Gorilla Biscuits when they decided that they shouldn't be upset because they don't even own a pet. But that 22 is a pretty dumb age, and I was like very outspokenly against the idea of Gorilla Biscuits like just deciding, hey, we're gonna go on tour again. We're gonna be a band again. I just, that just seemed ingenuine and just seemed fake to me at the age of 22. And so, Few and the Proud got offered this show, and I said, well, I don't want to do it. And everyone else was like, well, we're doing it. And I said, okay, well, I'm not going to do it. And it honestly came down to like me just not being in the band over that show. And I was just, I mean, I don't know. I have like a weird history of just quitting bands for whatever reason, So that happened.
And you have commitment issues. But But I will say,
A lot of issues.
to summarize your explanation on this, you quit the band because you didn't like Gorilla Biscuits.
I mean, unless you were just not listening to anything I just fucking said.
I'm boiling it down because I think the one thing to kind of take out of this too, I didn't touch on this, but I was the kid in 2006 that bought the $30 Paul Frank shirt with the gorilla with like the gold tooth on it. And
God.
I bought it from, I think it must have been like after, I bought it from Rev, so it wasn't like from a show, but I do remember that being such a huge deal that they were doing this stuff with Paul Frank at the time, because Paul Frank was a well-known designer and he had crossed over and all this stuff, right? I will tell you that like
you're a band that appealed to, like, you know, you wrote these songs when you're like 16. You come back, you know, obviously to make some money, right? Whatever. Yeah. You know, you're selling $30 t-shirts to the same 16-year-old crowd that you played to when you started. I mean, I just think it's a bunch of, I mean,
pretending that they care about our scene just because our money's green.
Seriously, man, like, fuck that.
I mean, but if you think about it, if we take into account of inflation, $30 tee, you know,
nobody was selling $30 tee.
It wasn't 30, but they were selling
aside.
Yeah, I mean, aside for sure. But you know, if you take into inflation based on the 80s and like what a shirt cost in the 80s, what it cost you know,
dude, you are on some shit right now.
listen.
Try to remember 2006.
I remember
t-shirts were $10.
$10. They were $10. They were $10 until like
dude, a Bane shirt in 2006 was probably $12.
Yeah. Well, what about the Bane hoodie that had the stitched logo on it though? That was probably like $35, right? And you had to have, and they had a credit card machine there, so you could like swipe it and like make sure you could, you know, borrow your parents' card and pay for it. But like, I agree. Like, listen, you don't have to twist my arm on it. I was like, I paid $30 for it off of Rev, and I mean this sincerely. When I got the shirt, I remember getting it and honestly thinking like, damn, this is actually lame as hell. And I remember being like lame as hell because it had gold foil on it. And I
don't know anything about this. What is this?
I didn't think I'd have to show you guys. I'll have to send it in the chat. But like, I didn't know that it was a gold foil on the shirt.
I think it's funny that you're pretending like that's the only shirt that you own that has gold foil on it. You fucking Ed Hardy motherfucker.
That's exactly what it was. Ed Hardy was huge at that time, and I always hated that stuff. So anyways, I got it, and eventually I got rid of it. I don't think I actually wore it because I thought it was just yellow. I didn't know it was gold. Anyways, the point is, I think in summation of all this stuff, Gorilla Biscuits, I acknowledge the positive impacts that they've had as a band, but it's a band that I do not wish to ever listen to. If I was at a fest, at a fest and they so happen to be playing or something like that, I'm not saying that I would like stand outside by myself, you know, like there's songs from the 7-inch that I would, you know, it'd be fine to see, you know, but like, I don't hate them enough to like you said, that I wish it didn't exist, but it just doesn't connect with me. And it's really a style of hardcore and the influence that it had. It's just not for me, you know?
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I think that's well said. You know, I came into this knowing that I was going to trash it and like make jokes about it, but I think that's very well said. You know, if we were at a show and Gorilla Biscuits opened with that, you know, horn intro, and, you know, people obviously are already diving the second the horns come in, you know, I'd be thinking to myself, that's fucking stupid.
What about, hey.
But you know, they go into New Direction, which is obviously what they're going to open with. I would watch the few minutes of that and I'd be like, this is cool, you know, and then they would play their other songs and it would suck. And that's all there is to it.
What about the song competition? I like really wanted to talk about the song competition. And like the whistle is one thing that's like genuinely I actually kind of like that little quirk. I don't like the harmonic on Start Today, but like the whistling competition is like kind of cool. But
I'm trying to think
like the song competition, it's like literally just about like how competition can be destructive to relationships. And like, I don't know, it's like kind of a radical thing to say for like a youth crew band at that time, I think. And like just on its face, which I
I'm
think
trying to remember the song because like I made the mistake of not listening to this like right beforehand, which I was planning on doing, but I didn't. So I can't really think of like that song right now.
we'll listen to it after this, and we'll talk about it later.
We'll talk about it another time. There's a whistle in it.
Yeah.
It's like do 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 do, and then it goes like. That's kind of I think that's a close approximation of it.
It's pretty close. Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds beautiful.
Like the whole record, I feel like the whole record kind of has like it sounds like a faded photograph or something. And like, I think that because of the cover art too, like the black and white with the color or whatever, but like that whistle to me, it like conjures a kind of weird, like ghostly, like this is just like it's like, I feel like that must have sounded like weirdly dated at the time, like I just don't, even with like, I was like, yeah, this record sounds old, but I'm like, even a lot of records that came out right then don't sound old like that. And that whistle too is just like weirdly, I don't know, it's like strange how it sounds just like backwards looking in a, again, unique way that makes it cool to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm
Well, I mean,
excited to hear it now because I want to check that out.
well, that's the thing about the record as a whole is like if you look at it from the time that it came out, there's a lot of like creative aspects to it that are done that weren't being done at that point in time, right? And obviously we're impactful to the point to where it's still a record that people talk about to this day. But you like and not in the same way that like the storm is, with like the actual storm, like, coming into like the track itself. There's a lot of like unique, like different aspects musically on the record that make it unique enough that I think that's why it has such a broad reach, like
Yeah.
it was like the other thing that I didn't like really get to like touch on, but like this is funny, but I don't really consider myself like a hater by any means. Like we're talking about this record, I'm telling you that I don't like it, but like I do really get excited when I see people or kids or whatnot get excited about like the bands that they like, with like fests and things that like we've played and stuff, or just shows in general. If it's with bands that I'm not really into, there's something to be said about like seeing a kid like lose a shit about like a 16-year-old kid lose a shit for like Gorilla Biscuits or something like that's cool to me,
Yeah.
or like a girl that's like stage diving and singing along to like Degradation or whatever. Like that is cool to me, and that's like powerful because at the end of the day, like that's really what like hardcore is about, is really just really connecting with the people that need to be connected with, the ones that aren't like don't have an outlet or a way to be connected to, so it's like I respect all those things about this record, except for the fact that I think it's awful, and the fact that I just don't like it. I just don't. It's just not like my cup of tea,
I want to touch on what you just said about like, seeing young kids getting excited. Like, I think that's like a really impactful statement when it comes to just like feelings on hardcore in general, especially as you get older. Because I'll be honest, like the second you said that, I started imagining, do I feel the same way when I see like people that are like in their 30s going off to hardcore? I'll be honest, no, I don't. Like I've got this inborn like hatred of other people that like sets in, and I'm just like, these people are all fucking dumb, but like when I see that the opposite when it comes to like a young kid like losing a shit, like I don't think I care what the band is, like that just like means something to me, and it just like it's really really impactful to see that, like when you see like that fire of hardcore alive in a young kid, like that there's very little bias or like outside influence that's coming in. Like they just love this shit, and like every one of us remembers what that was like. And like, it really, really still makes me happy to see like the roots of hardcore, like strong in young kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's like, well, that's the thing is like I do think it matters what bands it is too, because like you can imagine, a young teenager. I mean, I could think of myself like other bands that I liked at the same time I was getting into Gorilla Biscuits. Some I still think like, oh, I would think it was cool for a teenager to get into this and like it would actually be positive. But like also I was listening to fuck like Guttermouth, you know, like, which who cares about, you know, like whatever, like Guttermouth is a band that like I don't think has a reach that is really intended to be like influential, but it's like just such a stupid band, you know. It's like
Buttermouth is a band you'd see 37-year-old me going to.
Yeah.
but it's just like I don't know. It's just like, or like, there's just so many other things that are like the more accessible side of punk and hardcore stuff where it's just like, I don't know. I mean, it is kind of cool that at least Gorilla Biscuits is a band that like you could, you know, have some sort of like developmentally appropriate thought provocation from listening to
Totally.
at an early age. And like, yeah, like I'll admit, even if I knew someone our age that was like as gung-ho about this band or specifically this record, that would be like, I'd be like, ooh, that's like not super appropriate for our age, you know?
like a 16-year-old kid that's like, man, I just love One Life Crew.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Conversely, yeah. It's just like, you know, like it's fine. Like obviously they're figuring things out or whatever, but I'm definitely just not like I would definitely be like bummed out that that was like the thing that they're gravitating toward, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, you know, the one thing too to think about that you bring up with that, as far as like, you know, bands that are influential for like younger kids and stuff, right? Not to be like, you know, like a parent or anything like that, because I honestly, if my kid was listening to like Infest, you know, at a young age, I'd be like, that's fucking awesome, right? Or
Oh
like,
yeah.
you know, or like Lack of Interest. I'd be like, this is great. Like this is I raised him right. But like, I think that there's something about like stuff like this LP, that you could be 16 years old and talk about it, and you were in hardcore at 16, but you could also not have been. You've been out of hardcore for like 15 years. And it's probably a record that you probably still listen to and can connect to some rando on because they also listen to it at 16-year-old. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Where like it's one of those things that like it transcends because it can be that that sort of like gatekeeper record of sorts, you know, where like it gets you in the door and you know is supposed to help expose you to things that you would possibly like more. It's just like it's something to kind of ease you into listening to like punk and hardcore, right? Because it's a very easy listening to record. But there's a lot of people that probably don't get to that point, and by the time that they're listening to stuff that's a little bit more, I'm not going to say in line with punk and hardcore, but like I would say faster music, you know, stuff that you would consider to be more like hardcore and like, you know, like 82, you know, US hardcore type of stuff, like Negative Approach and stuff like that. They may not get to that point and they may have dropped out, right? But they may still always listen to this record. And it's kind of like, that's also cool too. You know what I mean? Because, you know, I always tell people like, you sort of have to like when it comes to punk and hardcore, we didn't all like start off listening to like the stuff that we like now. You know what I mean? It was a progression.
Yeah.
And Gorilla Biscuits served its purpose to me as much as it probably served its purpose to you guys in certain ways. It just so happens that for me, I no longer connect to that record the way that like you do, Nick, or you know, John apparently now may connect to it again. I don't know, but like, you know, it's what
I definitely did like Start Today at a time.
yeah.
You know, I got into it like a lot of us did. Would you say, based on some of the things you just said, could we all agree that Start Today, like sonically, is a more accessible take on, say, like what Break Down the Walls did,
Absolutely.
where it's like
100%.
yeah. And
Yeah. I don't even really put them in that close of contact with how they sound, you know?
yeah, I think that I mean they both sound completely different, but they're both, you know, late 80s positive hardcore records, you know, that like have a very similar message if you think about it.
I would put it more in line. I think We're Not in This Alone is sonically more accessible than Break Down the Walls is, because I think there's a lot of like conceptual lyrical things. And I think the music isn't, to me, we can talk about this some other time, but to me, the music's not as aggressive as Break Down the Walls is, you know, and the speed of the songs aren't either. So I would maybe compare those two, but it's 100%. If you're going to try to get someone into punk and hardcore that likes, you know, that likes more traditional, like No Effects, or like more, or even just like more traditional punk music, or just like alternative music in general, this would be the record that would get them, like the bridge record, to get them to possibly like things like Negative Approach or SSD. You know, you wouldn't start off with SSD the kids will have their say, because that's going to be too abrasive, right? But you need something to kind of bridge it. This is that record for lots of people, I think.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is like, I don't even feel like I really connect with this record anymore. Or that it doesn't really resonate with me emotionally. Like it doesn't really make me feel anything. It's just like I feel like I just am kind of like, yeah, it's like cool that maybe we agree more than I think, because it's like I'm just kind of like, yeah, it's good that it exists, and I would be psyched for like a young person getting into it because it seems like a positive thing in addition to being like, well-meaning.
I'll just say right now, like, as much as I can admit, like, everything that you were both saying is absolutely valid, and like it actually does make me kind of appreciate it in different ways now. But for somebody that's like getting older and more jaded and just like grumpy, that is not a record that's going to hold up in terms of like in terms of like how it makes you feel, or how it made you feel when you were 16, like it's going to get stale. And it did for me, for sure. Like, it's just to me, that record's just annoying now.
See, I think it's charmingly naive, like, and that's what I think I like about it. It's like, yeah, it's just
I
like,
like that.
I'm glad that some people can hold that feeling.
Yeah, I like that. I like that, charmingly naive. I think that's so accurate for it, because I think that they probably didn't expect it to do what it did. I would assume, I mean, I haven't done a ton of reading into what was going on around the time, or what they were thinking about when they were writing this record, but like, I'm sure they didn't expect it to be this. I'm sure in their eyes, they may have been thinking they wanted to do something that was a little bit more progressive, because at that point in time in hardcore, everyone was kind of transitioning to like, what is the next stage for playing music? This record just didn't end up being that for them at the time, which is why like they kind of went and did their own thing, and Quicksand became a deal, and then Civ and all that stuff. They kind of went in their own like separate directions, and then kind of came back to it, because it kind of like,
I think this is like a crucial topic we kind of need to talk about. Yeah,
let's talk about how influential like this slew of rev bands were to like you can almost like, it's almost like a genre family tree,
Yeah.
like you've got Gorilla Biscuits Start Today that brought bands like Lifetime, the first two Saves the Day records,
Yep.
Newfound Glory, that stuff is huge, and
Yep.
it was huge, like is huge, whatever. Then you got Judge, another rev band that basically, in my opinion, I mean, this is like something that can be disputed, but along with Cro-Mags, like basically birthed metalcore. I mean, that's, I don't know, like it's kind of crazy to think about like these records that came out around the same time, or like within a few years of each other on Rev, that were responsible for so many subgenres.
well,
Totally.
one thing that I really don't get, and I've never understood, is like the song New Direction. It's like it seems like it's like simultaneously like hypercritical of change, right? Of like any sort of like, it's about like, you turn your back, moved on, like left us in the dust. But it's also like seems like it's kind of trying to forge some sort of other path. Like at first, while I was like getting a little crazy with this, I was like, is this supposed to be kind of like they're doing like a Revolution Summer thing, but for youth crew? I was like, wait, no, but they're actually singing about how that's like, they're not trying to like turn a new leaf. But then what the, like, who is, when it says like a stage dive makes me feel more alive than coded messages? Who is that? What is that supposed to even be referencing? Like metal with like the coded messages, or like Pink Floyd, or like, who is that supposed to be?
I see. I feel like it. I always thought it was like a shot at like bands like Pink Floyd and the Beatles, where it's like you've got. See, to me, that song is less about like maybe a shift in musical style for hardcore, and more like the idea of people like abandoning the values that they obtained from hardcore, and kind of like move on to like being like a fucking rock star or something. And I feel like maybe the coded messages thing is like kind of like a stab at like just like what you think, the typical normal civilian is excited about when they get a record. You know what I mean? It's like they're not thinking about like the spirit of youth, like stage diving and shit like that. It's like more like, oh, cool, if you play this Beatles song backwards, he says this, you know. I mean, I think that's sick too, but, I mean, you know, I think that's kind of like, it's more about like less about like us like music and more about like the spirit
Okay.
that they're singing about. That's just my
Yeah. But like, I think I like, without really analyzing it, I always kind of thought like, oh, new direction. It's like they're going in a new direction, but no, it's like the song is about, it's called New Direction because it's saying the new direction is that rock star lifestyle, I guess.
right. I mean, to be honest, like nobody in Gorilla Biscuits like ever really truly like abandoned, you know, like their hardcore values. I mean, like not so much, you know, like
Well, and not in the ways that bands before them did, you know, with hopes that they would become bigger. You know what I mean? Like they arguably were in bands that were bigger. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like they were in bands that were bigger than Gorilla Biscuits, but that they continued to still kind of keep those values and that connection to the scene, which is why a lot of those guys are still very much like looked up to and you know, appreciated in, you know, 2021. You know.
for sure. And like I think that like the, you know, them writing that record, like that is, you know, we've talked about how it is more accessible. Like I don't think that they were by any means trying to like get big off that record like we talked about earlier. You know, like
No,
I
I
think
don't think
that,
so.
you know, it's still fast. It's definitely more melodic and more positive. But like I mean, honestly, like I can give it to them that they made a creative record, especially in comparison to what was going on at the time.
Yeah. And and it doesn't sound like, I mean, it kind of sounds bad, like just not like super professional, or like, it's just like the guitar is kind of a weird tone. Like it doesn't sound like this,
It
like,
kind of sounds exactly like this, like the 7-inch does in terms of like the production. Like I think Don
yeah,
Fury might have even recorded it.
yeah, I think, yeah, we should look that up. But like, then, yeah, oh, shit, there was something else. Did is it true that Walter wrote all the lyrics?
That I never knew. I assumed that
I've heard that.
I
I've
feel
heard
like
that
that's
too.
always been something I took for granted as true, but I don't really know where and
that
why.
would mean that Walter pretty much wrote everything then, right?
Yeah, I guess. Which is interesting because now doesn't he like play more like poppy, almost like rock and roll like kind of
Well, I
stuff?
mean,
So,
I don't really know a ton about like what Walter is doing now, but I mean, I know like Rival Schools and Quicksand. Like,
yeah,
I mean, definitely did not stick to like fast hardcore really.
yeah. Which I
Yeah,
guess I guess that's pretty evident here too. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, like, I Walter's contributions to like punk and hardcore with like Gorilla Biscuits, but then also like with alternative music in general,
For sure.
um, kind of, I hate to say it, but it's always missed me. You know, it's not like it's not for lack of trying to connect with it. He plays his other stuff that's like more alternative with like, you know, punk roots has you know, I've tried listening to. There's some stuff that I think is okay, but it's I've never connected. And that's the thing. Walter is a guy that like people will, I mean, what would consider to be like maybe like a top 5 contribution to like hardcore in general, but musicians in general, because he continued to be just kind of, you know, kind of like what Wes Isold is for like, you know, maybe our generation is what Walter has been from the get go. Just someone
I've
that's
always,
been
I've
had his
always
hands
loved
in a
and
lot of different
respected.
stuff, you know?
I've always loved and respected Walter. Like just like, you know, like the person that he appears to be, you know, like
Yeah.
the contributions he's made to music. Like, I mean, it just seems like a stand-up influential guy that like still knows his roots, you know, at the end
Well,
of the
like, and he was like really into Title Fight. And I think he helped record or produce like one of the Title Fight records because he really believed in it. And that's the cool thing about like a guy like Walter or just people that are pretty self-aware of hardcore kind of in its sense being kind of like a young person's game, right? Like I think you
yeah,
could totally make punk and hardcore as you get older and you still have a passion for it and all that stuff. I think that's like really important, but I think it's also important to afford opportunities for younger up and coming artists
yeah,
and bands like Walter did with like Title Fight because um you just don't see that a lot with you know, you get bands that come through, especially some of the reunion bands, you know, that maybe aren't putting out new music but are continuously like playing gigs, but they're also not bands that are like watching the openers or like real glued into like what's going on in the scene. They just play music because they're musicians, you know what I mean? Walter's not a guy that's like that, and he's, you know, you hear about him dropping names of like newer bands and stuff like that all the time in interviews and really supporting like newer artists and stuff. And I think that's cool. That's important. You know what I mean?
It
That's
really
really
makes
cool.
the basis for me quitting Few and the Proud back in 2006. Like not really hold up so much.
You got to get back into that band. You got to get back into
You got to get back into that band. Call Bernie.
I gotta get back into Few and the Proud. I made a mistake, guys. But no, I mean, I think like, you know, these are all like really good points about like, you know, the people behind this record, you know.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of like a good way to close this out. You
Yeah.
know,
Definitely.
today. The other portion of each episode that we want to do here is to touch on something that's more current. And yeah, we were talking about that electric chair 7-inch that just came out on Iron Lung. What's it called again?
Social capital.
Social capital. Yep.
Right? Yeah, I mean, I'll start. I listened to it and it's fucking awesome. It's with all the heavy music that's like out, like pretty much. I feel like most music that's in the punk and hardcore realm, like lately and like of the last like 5-10 years, it's like it's always going to be heavy in some way, and this is a band that's just like not heavy at all. It's like they really take from that, like, I mean, it's not even as heavy as like Negative Approach. It's like strictly like there's no heaviness to it at all. It's just fast. It reminds me of Formaldehyde Junkies, to be honest.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it totally does. And I think this is definitely more in line. If we're talking about like music that I probably gravitate more towards, this is a pretty good like textbook idea. So if you're like, what would Antonio like? This would be something that I would like. I like fast music. I like punk and hardcore to be fast. I like slower stuff. I mean, I love Marauder. Like I love like, you know, things that would be considered to be like harder, you know, I like Madball, you know, those types of things. But like my bread and butter is hardcore, and the best to me is when it's fast, right? So like the cool thing about this band, because I have a little bit more like a little bit more of a connection that we didn't like talk about with this, but so
yeah, I didn't realize all the KC. I didn't realize
yeah
that these guys were like in Beta Boys and like what was that? Dirty Work.
What was the Beta Boys? Because literally the first thing I thought of when I put it on, I'm like, this kind of reminds me like kind of like that Beta Boys style. But I didn't even know that this band was from KC. Are they from KC?
No, they're from Olympia.
Oh, okay, got it.
I'm pretty sure it's Olympia, but up on Washington. But yeah, so like Trey, I've known Trey, who sings in the band, since he was in high school. So like he used to play in a band called Drooling Slits. And John, you played at Dedo, who played in Drooling Slits, his barn, which was like a we won't get into that, but it was like a really, honestly, a pretty historic like KC show. I would say like something that gets talked about even to this day. But it was his barn that he had basically in the middle of the country in Liberty at the time. But anyways, I've known Trey since he was in high school, because I used to teach the Avid program at the high school that he was at, and he was also like a fan of Spine. So I would see him at shows. Also, like Trevor, who was in Beta Boys, same thing there. And yeah, so it's cool. It was cool to kind of see him specifically go from bands like Drilling Slits, Beta Boys to, you know, Electric Chair, right? And Electric Chair being a band.
Did he move to Washington then?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
that makes sense now. I get it.
Yep. He moved to Washington. A lot of KC guys moved to Washington in about like 2016-ish, like a big group of like most of the Beta Boys. Dave, who plays drums, I believe he plays drums in Electric Chair. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he plays drums in Electric Chair. He played in Suck Dry. Do you remember Suck Dry, John?
Of course.
Oh, I remember that band too. Yeah.
Sick band. Sick band.
There was a lot of good bands that came from KC.
Yeah, like that was, I mean, I definitely a band that like I revisit often. I think they were awesome. And Dave, he played drums in Beta Boys as well, and maybe Dirty Work, or maybe he played. I can't remember if he played. I think he played in both bands, but I can't remember if he played drums in both of them. But anyways, I think he plays drums in Electric Chair. And so definitely, like you said, when you thought of like Beta Boys as like one of the first things that came to mind, I definitely like feel that there is definitely a lot of synergies there. But I think when you look at it, it's like this gets said a ton, but it's like no frills. It's a fucking hardcore record, like front to back. Like there's not even like a ton of those like pogo parts that like got really popular there in the mid 2000s. You remember a lot of those bands that were doing that, which to me I appreciate a lot, like because I think that stuff kind of like, there were some bands that were good that did it well, but it kind of got played out. You know what I mean? It was just like Whippets hardcore. You know what I mean? But like this is just straight up fast to the point, you know, and I think really embodies just like the true essence of like hardcore. There's just no bullshit to it, you know, not something that you would think that you would hear in 2021 with kind of where the state of hardcore is at. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Yeah. No, I feel this is like, this is a band, I'll be honest, like I've heard of them for a while and like people talk about them a lot, but I like really had sat down and listened to any of the records all the way through, and I really like it. And I think that, I don't know, like I feel like I always saw them compared to Gangrene, which I like definitely get, but also like that first song on the 7-inch, I was like, this just, it kind of sounds like the Fix. Like it actually kind of sounds like a little bit like the Vengeance riff or something, but like it's got that kind of burly but not heavy. It's like gritty but not heavy, like John, like you said, but also just very, I don't know, very well, like they're fucking like good at playing too. Like
like the guitar is like very almost like classic sound. You know what I mean? It just very like classic sound, and it just sort of like the guitar is sort of like doing its. They're kind of like, hey, just do whatever with it. You know what I mean? Like adding like different accents and stuff like that. It's crazy.
It sounds like every song starts on like the 10th fret of the E string, basically.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely nothing heavy about it, which I like. And you know, there's no mosh parts. Like it's just fast, you know. And it's you know, the vocals are vicious, and like it's a band that like, you know, those bands that can just be fast, but you're still gonna like fucking murder people when they play. It's like that kind of shit, you know, like you know, kind of like the Repos. Although like even when you think about like the Repos like tones, you know, like the Repos, like in terms of guitar tones, they sound like Marauder compared to this band. You know?
Yeah, they do.
But I mean, yeah, it's really, really, really good. Just it's exactly what you would want in a fast hardcore record.
Yeah,
I
think so.
I encourage everybody to check it out. They also have they did something before this too, right? Before this 7-inch.
They have a couple other few, right?
I started to listen to like another track because it came on like right after the 7-inch, like on Spotify, but I didn't have time to listen to anything more. But that also sounded really good.
Yeah, Performative Justice is cool. It's like if you look at it, it's the art for it's really neat. It's cool. Like if you check it out, it's cool. It's just got like a hand, and it's got like, you know, like an not electric chair, but like, you know, like the lever, like for the electric chair, you know. And I don't know, it's cool because it looks different than this. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Trevor from Beta Boys did the artwork for this, only because it's just his style. Like I could just tell it's like his style. I'll have to ask him and see, but it just kind of hit me because the artwork before is like a photo, so it's different than like this, just visually. So which would be cool. It'd be a cool kind of like continued KC connection because Trevor's not in this band.
Shout out to Iron Lung Records too. I mean, I feel like everything that, I mean, maybe not everything, you know, because I haven't heard everything, but I mean, like anything that I've heard on that label is just like fantastic. And there's such like a good blend too. Like you're not going to get the same thing every time you hear something on that label.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like too, like with Iron Lung in the past, like maybe in the past 5 years, like, because I was very much aware of Iron Lung growing up, but I feel like in the past 5 years, like Jensen has like made it more of a point to invest a lot more into the label. Like he's putting out tons and tons and tons of records and kind of different stuff. You know what I mean? Like it's not like you're it's not what you would think. It's not like the early part of like their catalog, you know what I mean? Where it was just like a lot of like power violence and like adjacent kind of power violence stuff, you know what I mean? So I think that that's like cool. I mean, they did another KC band, False Brother, which is like they did their LP in which is fantastic. I don't know, John, if you would like it, but it's more in line with like your kind of post-punk, you know, sort of Joy Division as kind of gothy sort of like music, but you know, it's not something you would think that Iron Lung would put out, you know what I mean? Or like they did, I think that they did a joint release. They joint released the Internal Rot record, which
I mean, that's like the talk of the town, but it's fucking fantastic.
Yep, definitely. So I would agree with you.
Nope, never heard it.
Oh, I mean, dude, it's one of my favorite bands out right now in terms of like grindcore or like you know
that's cool.
grind violence or whatever you want to fucking call it. It's
yeah.
I mean, no, it's called their Internal Rot is the band, or Eternal Rot.
Internal
Rot.
Yeah.
I think 625 and Iron Lung did that together, right? This latest one.
Maybe, yeah. They did a Iron Lung. I know helped release it. I don't know if it was 625 or if it was. I thought that To Live a Lie had some sort of connection to it, but I don't remember.
Wait, is 625 still like releasing?
They're coming back. They're coming back. Yeah.
Was there like a long lapse in time when there were no
Yes.
releases? I was gonna say, because that was a shocker to hear right now, actually.
Yeah, Max moved to Japan and like I know he was like selling off all his records. Like it didn't really look like 625 was ever going to do anything again. But I feel like Max has always been involved in something, you know. But yeah, he just started recently like doing some shit again.
And we could definitely probably chat a ton about this on like a different episode, but I would say the thing with 625 becoming relevant in 2021, I think, again, I should say, has more to do with the fact that I think that there has been a lot more interest in, I think, power violence and that style of music kind of coming back again, because you know the late 2000s is kind of where a lot of that stuff kind of fell off. There was like a resurgence of power violence, I thought, in the late 90s going into the 2000s, into the mid 2000s. By the end of the 2000s going into like the 2010s, I don't feel like it was, and that's where you saw labels like 625 and Slap a Ham and that stuff just kind of like sort of not be as relevant anymore. But there's definitely been a push with bands like Regional Justice Center and stuff like that have tried to help push that narrative of influence of like this power violence.
Seems like power violence is always just going to have waves. You know, what are we on? Their seventh wave now? Like, I mean,
but it's never really talked about. It's never really talked about the same way like Youth Crew does. It really should be, because I think it's very much there is waves. There has been like actual waves of interest in bands, like bursts of bands of like that play, you know, power violence in somewhat of the traditional sense. Whatever, I mean, the gods of power violence would say it's not power violence, but I think we can come to the understanding that it is, right? So, or influence stuff. So I mean, it's not talked about as much, but there's definitely been waves of it for sure. So
maybe we'll get to that another time. We should probably wrap this up.
Yeah, definitely. I think go ahead, John, wrap us up.
let me wrap this up, guys. Like a nice little present. No, that's we're gonna call it for the day, for the first episode of the Hard Stance Hardcore podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. We're gonna definitely do more of these. Same thing each time. We're gonna try to focus on like a classic record, and then try to save the end for like a newer record. But yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks a lot for listening.